yachts up and down the coast. So I always enjoyed being here. I wrote a children's book called Billy the Oyster Man, based on a family of watermen that I had met on one of my stops, and I was just taken aback by the whole history and lifestyle. I became enamored with the Chesapeake while still in high school, reading James Michener's Chesapeake, and then William Warner's Beautiful Swimmers about blue claw crabs. I couldn't get enough of the place. So every time I took a job getting a boat up and down, for me it was, we must stop in the Chesapeake. We have to stop there. Anyway, before I get into the Jersey Boys and the Jersey Boat Builders, I wanted to give you a little background into who I am and how I came to the magazine business, which I've spent the last 25, almost 30 years of my watery career as a marine journalist. And I'll just give you a little anecdote just to start things off. I was in Key West on I had gotten permission to visit Cuba, and I got cleared by the State Department for a journalistic visa, and I was all excited with it. I had a crew of 2 with me, and we grabbed the boat up in Riviera Beach, and we brought it down to Key West, and we got there late in the afternoon, early evening. I said, okay, boys, let's go out. When in Rome, we're gonna hit one of the bars and just hang out. We didn't go to Sloppy Joe's because too many t-shirts there. So we found a nice little bar, and we're sitting there, we're having a couple of beers, and 2 old salts sitting a couple of stools away from me. And being a writer, my radar is always up for conversations. This one, my radar was giving me collision alert because something was going on there. These 2 guys had just come in from fishing, and they were very unhappy with their day of fishing. And they were, you've heard the expression, 3 sheets to the wind? These guys were 6 sheets to the wind. So, and you've seen all these guys, grizzled, beard, frayed shorts, old topsiders with their toes sticking out, t-shirts faded, the logos long since disappeared. The whole thing, the whole thing. Raccoon suntan from the sunglasses. One guy seems to be grabbing a thought out of the air. Hey, you know, the earth wobbles and it's tilted as it flips around the sun. The guy next to him says, what do you mean it wobbles? I don't feel no wobbling. I'll get a little dizzy now and then, but I don't feel no wobbling. And his friend muses on that for a second, and he says, well, you know, that's why we have weather. And that's why we had the Ice Age. And when he just kept it. And when the Ice Age receded, that's how we got the Florida Keys and all the highs and lows that we have around the Keys. Damn, that's why I run aground off a Lignum Vitae Key last week, because the Ice Age receded. And I said, that's beautiful. That was just great dialogue. So I just wanted to give you that little snippet of where I've been in my 25 plus years of marine journalism all over the world, every ocean, through the Panama Canal, the Caribbean, Europe. Okay, done that, been there, done that. So when I was very young, I grew up, I was born and grew up in the borough of Brooklyn, New York. Not Brooklyn, Ohio, Brooklyn, New York. And I lived in the inner part of the borough, and on weekends I'd go visit my family's parents, my grandparents. Sunday was my mother's parents, Saturday was my father's parents. Sunday, when I used to visit my grandparents, my grandfather would always take me down to Sheep's Head Bay in Brooklyn. I don't know if any of you know about Sheepshead Bay. Back in those days, it was the epicenter of charter boat and head boat activity. And about 3 o'clock, the boats used to come in. My grandfather used to put me in the car, take me down to Sheepshead Bay, and we used to wait for the boats to come in and the horns to be tooting. And for me, it was like, wow, this is great. I was a little kid. I was 7, 8 years old. What did I know? And I used to watch the boats pull in and the people get off, and then the mates would come out, you know, with their Helly Hansen yellows on and their boots, and they'd hawk their fish on the street. People would buy fish. Well, like a hungry bluefish, I was hooked. And for me, that's where I kind of start things in my career. I was a very good student through high school. When I got to college, I got a job in one of the marina service yards as a yard snipe. And basically, a yard snipe up where I come from is the guy who cleans up the yard when a boat is launched. I pick up all the wood, I pick up the beer cans, I pick up all this, throw it in. I was the guy that fell for the left-handed screwdriver joke. That's what it was all about. For me, it was, okay, you've got this pull to the sea, to boats, and to working on boats. And sure enough, I got a job as a mate on a head boat and worked in the yard and learned how to scrape bottoms, which I did a lot of, and even learned in those days we had wood boats. I learned how to caulk a boat with cotton, learned how to stuff the seams, learned how to change a stuffing box, even pull a prop. And then I fell in love. No, I didn't meet my wife yet, the woman who I would marry and bear us children. I fell in love with a boat. I fell in love with a 42-foot wooden down east Weber's Cove boat, which was built up in East Blue Hill, Maine. And I saw this boat, and that I have to have it. I've got to buy this boat. What I was going to do with it, I didn't know. So I scraped together some money. I talked to the owner. I begged, borrowed, and stole some money from relatives and friends, and I put together what I thought was a reasonable down payment. And sure enough, I was the owner of this 42-foot Maine-built lobster boat. 24-foot cockpit, little cabin, open flybridge. Single Ford Lehman flathead, 110 horsepower diesel engine. I was ready to go. I was ready to six-pack it. I had been in the process of getting my 100-ton because I had worked on pretty big boats, so I had amassed a great deal of sea time. So I had the idea that I'm going to document the vessel and I'm going to six-pack it. I'm going to take people fluke fishing, blue fishing, striped bass, which you call rockfish here, I believe. And anything that swims underneath the water, I was going to go and really be good at it. Come spring, and I'm ready to get my boat in the water. I got my scaffold set up and I'm sanding, and I get a little tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, and there's this very big man standing there. Khakis, web belt, khakis, hands like bear paws, fingers like sausages, big shoulders, barrel chest. Just a really salty looking boat you got there, son. I said, oh, thank you. He goes, who's the owner? And I said, I am. And he looks at me like this, and he kind of nods. He goes, okay. Ever you need help, you ask for Captain George. I said, oh, thank you very much, Captain George. Little did I know that Captain George Benarski was a local legend in that area. He was a mariner's mariner, a captain's captain, a mechanic's mechanic, navigator's navigator. There wasn't one thing that George didn't know about boats. And he took me under his wing. He became my mentor, became my guide, and more important, he became my friend. And I learned everything that I needed to learn from Captain George. One thing that I took away from it, I took a lot away from it, obviously, but he said to me, and I was already in my undergraduate college days, he said, "College boy, remember one thing. You're out there, you can't change a flat tire. You better know what to do, and you better know what to do fast, because things are going to go south on you." And I never, ever forgot that. 30 years, 40 years later, it still is in my head whenever I run a boat and whenever I'm doing anything around the water. So just to wrap things up, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate work. I worked that little boat as a six-pack for almost close to 9 years to get all my degrees. And I came to that crossroads where, am I going to academia? I got all the chops for it. Or am I gonna run this boat or other boats or whatever, however it takes me? So adjunct professor for a while, associate professor, assistant professor, and something was just scratching at me and gnawing at me. As fate would have it, I was reading the venerable New York Times one day. Don't hold that against me, I'm not political. And there was an ad in the sports section that said, "Writer wanted, must have at least 100-ton license, fishing experience." And I said, "Go no further." That's me. That was written for me. So I called up, got an interview, called back for a second interview, called back for a third interview, writing samples and all that, called back for a fourth interview. And at that one, I just said, "Look, guys, I've been here 4 times with you. It's a beautiful conference room you got here. I love sitting around here, chewing the fat with you, but publisher reached across the table, welcome aboard." Power and Modiat magazine, associate editor position, bottom of the barrel. 7 months later, I was promoted to senior editor. 13 years later, the wall in my office is covered with writing awards and accolades from boat manufacturers and all that other stuff. The last, 9 years now, deputy editor of Yachting magazine, and totally fulfilled in my career. I made the right decision at the right time, and for me, it paid off. So to get to Jersey Boys, sorry about the little detour there, I had developed a series, a year-long series in the magazine of notable personalities in the business that kind of steered the industry in a certain direction. Willis Slane, Christopher Columbus Smith, the founder of Chris Craft Boats, the Rybovich clan, all those people. And then I got the idea for the next year's issues to say, let's take the concept here and turn it into regional boat builders. How they got started, how they built their boats, why they built their boats, and what designs did they come up with to deal with local conditions. So, for example, the Carolina boys. The progenitor down there was an old captain named Omi Tillett. And he said, well, you know, I had an interview with him before he passed. He says, you know, I looked at what the Rybovich boys were doing, and I looked at what the Healey's were doing, and I looked at what these guys, and I said, I got to run Oregon Inlet. So I got to have a boat with a deep fee and a big flare to get through that inlet to get out to do my fishing. So Omi built his boat because of those conditions. And so did Jared Bay's Randy Ramsey and Paul Scarborough, Ricky Scarborough, and Paul Mann. I mean, they all came from that. So being from New Jersey, although my birth certificate says Brooklyn, New York, I very quickly left the craziness of Manhattan and the 5 boroughs for Long Branch, New Jersey, down the shore. And I live in, my wife and I, and when the family visits, we have a house in Monmouth Beach right now. And the back of my house is the Shrewsbury River. Right now, my boat lift and my dock are bare, but Tuesday, I've got a 24-foot Grady White coming, so I'm all set. So I came up with the idea for regional boat builders and a series of articles based on those areas. And I have a special relationship with the Healeys at Viking. So I kind of started with them. I've just got some notes I'm going to refer to because, okay. So there are a bunch of, I could call them hot rod, or I don't want to say wise guys because that's New Jersey, but there were a bunch of boat builders that were all clamoring for their position in the industry. Now remember, we're talking post-World War II, 1946, 1947. So forget about fiberglass. These were all wooden boat guys. And if you want to go back to, you know, the round bottom bilges of Pacemaker or the deep V of Post, you know, that's what they were all experimenting with. So what I did was I keyed on several of the early boat builders, and because of my kind of special relationship with the Healeys, Bob and Bill, who started Viking, and Patrick, who now, there's Bob's son, who's the CEO of the company, president. I go way back with them. Unfortunately, Bob and Bill are no longer here with us, but I did get to talk with them early on in the research for this. So, you know, Patrick laments, he says, you know, Ken, I started pushing a broom when I was 8 years old in the plant. And then by 9 years old, I was driving the garbage truck, you know. And by 14, I was hanging out with the designers and the builders on the floor. So I said, okay, Patrick, I want to kind of back up to the history. So again, Bill and Bob Healey were the original owners of Viking, and they had bought a yard in New Gretna from, I believe it was called Peterson Viking. And Bob's idea was to, well, we have all this land here. It was a tremendous parcel of land. I don't know if any of you have ever been up to New Gretna, to the Viking plant. Any Jersey people here? All right, here we go. It's a huge piece of parcel, and in fact, they have grown it some. But it was called the Peterson Viking Boatworks. And Bob had an idea. He said to Bill, let's run a marina, and over there we'll build homes. We'll sell the homes, and the people live right on the water, and it'll be great. The marina was so successful that the home thing went away very, very quickly. Now remember, this is back in when they first started was post-World War II. What happened then was, what I found in my research was exactly who built the first New Jersey sport fishing boat is in question. But everybody agrees, or most of the guys that I spoke to, no matter what boat builder they were in New Jersey, agrees that Egg Harbor was literally the first Jersey-style boat that came out of the yards. The inspiration for Egg Harbor, by the way, probably came. There was a very robust rum-running organization in New Jersey during that time. They'd run the molasses or the finished product at night with very fast, sleek, very narrow-beamed boats. And at night there was no coastal radar, no Coast Guard fast boats or anything like that. And as the guys from Egg Harbor said, we were honest guys back then. We're just trying to make a buck. And this seemed a good way to make a buck, to keep our boat business going. So back then, Ventnor Boats was known for its very sleek, thin style of boats, and they were perfect for those clandestine runs at night. Ventnor, think Riva or Chris Craft with a Jersey attitude. That's kind of what Ventnor Boats was all about. When Ventnor then, in those early days, moved their plant from Ventnor City to Atlantic City. And what they wanted was more room to grow. Ventnor was a small town and there was no more land to grab. Atlantic City was still the wild, wild west. And there was lots of land to grab. Out of that group, and they were very diverse, were Russell Post and John Leek. Now Post, of course, Post Boats. John Leek would go on to Ocean Yachts, which of course was absorbed by Viking. Viking now owns all the property from the Leeks. And there was another guy named Phil Boyd, and Phil was a backyard boat builder. By the seat of your pants, he'd steam his wood, cedar on oak frames, and build his boats like this. No blueprints, no nothing. Let me see, that looks okay. Yeah, okay, that's all right. The fourth guy to join in was a guy named Harold Care, C-A-R-E, and he was called Pee-wee. Little guy, all right. Let's see, what do they call it? Vertically challenged. And Pee-wee was by far the most eccentric of those four horsemen. Talking about horses, Pee-wee was the guy who rode the horse off the platform at the steel pier in Atlantic City into the pool. I mean, think of that. It's just bizarre. But they had a talent and a vision for boat building. And when the four of them got together, two things happened. There was a tremendous thunderstorm with lightning, and the result of those four personalities, those four eccentric, was a boat. And the boats were really, really nice in those days. All right, so Jack Leek told me, who was the father of John, who kind of started Ocean Yachts. He said, Ken, I was there from the, and unfortunately he passed on as well. He said, Ken, I was there from the beginning. I watched it grow. I saw it grow. I was very instrumental. The Leeks have a heritage back to the 1700s of boat building in New Jersey. So there was a great deal of pride between the Leeks. There was Jack, John, John's son, and then we're up to J4 now. And J4 works for Viking. So Post and Leek opened their doors in 1946-47. Their first boat was a 28-foot Carvel-built, round-bilge skiff. Ted Haggis, who was a local New Jersey designer, was responsible for one of the original Jersey skiff boats. And it was interesting, the mayor of Egg Harbor City bought the boat for $3,000. I don't know if it's still around. But Willis Lane's Nitwits is still around. If you've ever seen that first Hatteras, it's still running. In fact, I actually drove it down in Palm Beach. So all the boats were around that same size, 28 to 38, 37 feet, cedar on oak cedar on oak built, very, very strong boats, very heavy boats. They had to be almost overpowered so that they wouldn't wallow in the water along the way. But the boats were all designed to get out of Manasquan, to get out of Shark River. These are, the only way I can describe them is they're akin to Oregon Inlet down in the Carolinas, where the ocean swells come in and really build up. If you've got a small boat, you do not run these inlets. It's very dangerous. You have to have a boat that's got some oomph and some power and the right design for it. And I'll just have a quick aside. The Carolina boys, because of Oregon Inlet, decided they wanted a deep feed with a big flare. Carolina flare, that's what they call those boats. And if you've seen any of Randy Ramsey's Jarrett Bay boats, you just look at that bow flare, and it's designed so when they go through the inlet and that water comes up, it gets knocked right down. Okay. If you're looking at who are the original designers of the Jersey boats, there was a guy named Bill Shell and Charlie Walters, and together they bought Post Yachts in 1975 and completely revamped the style. And what they did, and I had this discussion just before, they were watching what the Ryboviches were doing down in Palm Beach. They were watching what other boat builders were doing around the country, and they said, that's what we have to do. We have to kind of marry those designs and have our boats look like that, and more, have them perform like that. Because the Jersey coast, it's dedicated to fishing. This was before cruising came about. And C.N. Ray, C.N. Ray was the guy who developed Sea Ray. His name was C.N. Connie Ray. Really nice guy. I had a good conversation with him. If the Jersey design, if this conglomerate could be called anything, it was American tough. Had durability and a good value. And in those early days, those guys called their boats mutts because they had borrowed from so many designs that it was just Heinz 57. kind of boat is that? It's a Heinz 57. I had a little bit of Rybovich in there. A quick story about Rybovich. John Jr., Tommy, and Emil. John was the marine architect. He drew all the boats. So John, as the story goes, as his widow, Kay, told me, John was at his desk, and he was drawing lines for his latest sportfish boat, and Tommy leaned over his desk, grabbed his big gum eraser, erased the shear line, which he almost got his hands chopped off because John Jr. was okay, and said, John, let's break the shear. Let's make it look like this. And it was rough. And John said, wait a second. And he rounded it out a little bit and erased it. You mean like that? And Tommy said, yeah, let's build our boats like that. And every time you see a Rybovich now, that broken shear and a lot of other boats, that's kind of where it came from. Anyway, through the 1950s, later designs by designers Phil Bolger and a man named Dave Martin. I don't know if that name rings true, but in our area, Dave was one of the best known designers. They came up with a design for Egg Harbor, and it was incorporated. And Jack Leek said to me, and this is his quote, call it engineering, call it what you like. But that was his end of it, Dave Martin. He was pretty weight conscious, and those first boats were light and fast. As things happened with any business partnership, it started to fray at the edges because of the very, very strong personalities. Jersey boys, what can I tell you? So they started to kind of butt heads about the business, and everybody kind of went their separate ways. Let's just say there was enough where they couldn't work together anymore. So comes along Ken Jensen, and Ken gets to be the president of Post Yachts and really wants to break away from the whole group. Kind of that's what happened. Egg Harbor in the 60s sold its shares to Pacemaker, and I don't know if you know about Pacemaker boats. They were really nice looking boats, but man, they had round bottoms. And if you went out, and I captained a Pacemaker for a while, and you went broad beam to you rolled. You had to keep her into the wind and into any water. If the water was calm and nice, beautiful, we fished wonderfully with that boat, but man, don't go side two. Anyway, Egg Harbor would grow separate from Post, and that's when the Healey's bought the property in New Gretna, and I hate to be cliche-ish, but the rest is history. Viking is probably the top sport fishing production boat in the world. I would say in the world, but you know, they far outpace anybody else who's building boats. And if you want a 92-foot Viking, Pat Healey will build it for you. It'll be a one-off, and he'll keep the mold. He won't put that on the production line. But if you want a 92-foot Viking, which I drove, and it's a beast, he'll do it for you. Let's skip. By the 1970s, let me just retrace it a little bit. Fiberglass had replaced wood as the building material of choice. There's a famous story. Willis Slane started Hatteras Boats in High Point, North Carolina, and he would raid the production line. and I mean raided. Willis died in his mid-50s, hard drinker, hard smoker, excessive man. But he had what they call the Willis-Slane test for his laminates. And Willis used to come in to the production line with a .45 automatic, and he'd shoot the laminate, and if the bullet went through the laminate, he says, stop the line, take them all off, that's not strong enough. And to this day, everybody fears that the ghost of Willis-Slane will come back into the... But Hatteras, if I can criticize Viking a little bit, they have cord bottoms. As a captain, as a runner of boats, I like a solid bottom. I'll give up a couple of knots. I don't care. Hatteras solid bottoms, and they've never changed since then. Okay, Egg Harbor in the 90s found itself in a little bit of financial problem. Along comes Dr. Ira Trocchi. Whatever your feelings about Ira, Ira was the corner man for Mike Tyson. Ira is a surgeon, a facial surgeon by trade, and he was Mike Tyson's cut man when Mike Tyson had his career as a professional heavyweight boxer. Anyway, Ira just had this affinity for boats. Why? Every time I ask him, he goes, I don't know, but I kind of understand it, just from my background. Ira saw an opportunity, one, a business opportunity, and two, something to fulfill his desire to own a boat company, and he bought Egg Harbor. After that, he bought Buddy Davis. After that, he bought, well, I just forget the names, but he's got 4 lines now. And obviously Ira had a lot of money to put into the business. He disclosed to me, he says, Ken, I put $10 million into it out of my pocket. Okay. There was a renaissance for the Egg Harbor boats under Ira. His thing was, he was happy he could contribute to the marine industry. And I believe him. I know Ira for a long time. He can be a little rough on the edges. But I think he was sincere when he conveyed that. I didn't want to see these beautiful New Jersey built boats, or this plant, or these people who work here, who count on their paychecks, go by the wayside. So he did revamp everything. So in wrapping things up a little bit, the next time you see a Jersey boat go by, most of them have very sleek, low profiles. And the DNA of the Jersey boats are come from this entrepreneurial group of wildcat boat builders who, again, you know, kind of had some idea of what they were doing, but technically not like today. But they hung in there and they did it. And I have a quote by Tom Waits, a songwriter and lyricist, which was covered by native son Bruce Springsteen, born in Freehold, not Asbury Park. I know Bruce, by the way, and I know most of the members of the band, and especially Roy Bittan, who's what is this, 2001? Probably know Roy about 45 years now. Because nothing matters in this whole wide world when you're in love with a Jersey girl. Thank you very much. And I tried really hard to get some archival photography of these guys that I've been talking about. but because of COVID and the marketing people weren't there, and that's, I couldn't get them. But if you want to know anything about Jersey Boat Builders, it's all online, and you can see Pee Wee jumping off the platform on his horse. Yes.
What are the combinations of boat builders today? You said that Viking and Ocean are together.
Right. Right. Yeah, Viking, Ocean, Egg Harbor, Buddy Davis. I think he's got 2 other lines. There was just a lot of acquisitions in Europe. The Ferretti Group has I think they're up to 9 different lines. And here in the States, it's remained a little calm as far as that. All the Carolina boys are still, you know, Randy Ramsey at Jarrett Bay has not accumulated any other boat lines.
The coast is still.
Yeah, yeah. Yes?
And they're still making egg harbors?
They're still making Egg Harbors. Ira's still in production. Of course, with COVID, all the plants were shut down for what, 12 to 18 months now, and they're just getting going. In fact, when I spoke to Pat Healy, he said we had to slow down the production line because we can't get resin. So the supply chain was you know. Right now, just on that note, I run a 54-foot aluminum catamaran up in New York Harbor as part of a boating service. We have 3 boats. That's the biggest one. And we're running a pair of 425 horsepower Yamaha outboards. We're getting 30 knots out of those monsters. I was doing some maintenance on them 2 weeks ago. I pulled the cowling off. It was like a snowstorm inside. The manifold, the water jacket, had sprung a leak. And the salt water was just spraying all over the place. The point is that I tried to get a part. I tried to get that water jacket, and they told me 6 to 9 months out. I go, unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. I got 400 hours on these engines. I got to get this boat back in the water. The next day, I had the part overnighted to me. But if you try to get a 425 horsepower Yamaha, there are 3 engines in the whole country, because they have 700 containers on container ships waiting to get into the ports to unload. Anyway, just an aside. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, sorry.
A question. You know, as boats become more and more high tech with all these cores and lightweight, you know, epoxy resins and all this stuff, how much has the design of the hull influenced the way they perform compared to construction methods?
That's a great question, because I had an interview with Everett Pearson, and Everett Pearson developed resin infusion for the U.S. Navy, which is now the standard in boat building. If your boat's not resin infused, you probably have voids in your hull and in your bottom that could lead to delamination. But anyway, resin infusion, what they do is they create zero gravity and they pull the resin through the fiberglass, through the matting. What it results in is a lighter, stronger boat. So what you can do is you can up the power of that vessel, and you have more ability in your hull design and in your running bottom design. So yeah, yes, absolutely. The high-tech materials and the high-tech boat building procedures using computer-assisted design, it's a whole new ballgame.
So let me ask you a question a different way. How much has hull design changed in the last 30 years? Because I know we went through some awesome changes, but then it seems like it sort of slowed down, and now it's the lightweight, high-tech, and higher horsepower motors that are making today's boats perform better than the old ones. But has hull design gotten that much better since like the 70s?
Absolutely no. I would say no, because a hull design is a hull design, is the hull design. When Richard Bertram ran Moppy, okay, and that 31-footer, basically everybody absorbed that hull design because it was as good as it gets. So how can you improve on something that's as good as it gets? So the only thing that we've tweaked in all these years were the materials. But the basic hull design, you're going offshore on a 78-foot sport fisherman, you're running on a bottom that's from back then. Yes?
What's happening with 3D printing in boat building and what's the future?
Yeah, the components, some components, they're toying with it right now. It's not totally accepted yet, but they are toying with some 3D stuff. Right now, it's all small components. Nothing big that would mitigate safety or performance. So right now, it's all. One last thing I just popped into my mind about this trip to Cuba that I made from Key West several years ago. When you check in to customs there, and you have to check in with like 9 different, whatever, it's Cuba, what can I say? It was a great, I spent almost a week there, and it was just extraordinary. But because I was the journalist, and I had the visa, I was cleared, I was assigned a handler, my guide, but he was Cuban, Russian, Cuban, whatever. And he went wherever I went. He was my guy. He drove me here, he drove me there. I said, I want to see 2 things on this trip while you show me everything else. I want to see where Hemingway wrote The Sun Also Rises in Havana. I want to go up to the hotel room. And I want to go to La Finca, the farm outside of Havana. So we went up to the room, and it's a museum. They opens the door, I could look in like this, and that was it. That's all I was allowed to look in, because Hemingway is revered in Cuba, the big gringo, they call him. But when I went out to La Finca, which is where he lived, the original Pilar is right there in front of the house. So we go in the house, I take out a $20 bill and give it to the Cuban Defense Fund or whatever the 20 bucks was going to. So it took me through the house, and there's a guard there, a uniformed Cuban soldier, and he said, I have to go speak to him for a moment. Oh, just walk around here, wait, I'll be right back. Boom, as soon as he left, I ducked into Hemingway's bathroom, and with the seat down, I sat on Hemingway's toilet. And there's a story in there for me that's been brewing ever since, and it's going to be called I Sat on Top of Hemingway's Toilet. I don't know where it's going yet, but it's going to go someplace. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.